Hi, everyone. I am Gabe Erickson, the CEO of Warrior Transition Outdoors, and welcome back to Freedom Friday. We have another episode this week where I'm going to be talking about some stuff that might seem controversial. And, the idea of Freedom Friday is to challenge things in our minds, whether that's a fact or like a fact, okay, a quote unquote fact, or a stereotype or a stigma or maybe a limiting belief or whatever it might be. We want to challenge the things that are keeping us down, keeping us in this cycle of pain and trauma and other suffering. And so, I've spoken a lot. If you followed our, interactions and posts at all, I've spoken a lot about this broken veteran narrative, and that it needs to go. That the victorious narrative really is the new era of how we need to speak about veterans. Right? There is a time and a place for what happened and that support our troops movement, but underneath that support our troops came this really like toxic seed, which was seeing veterans as broken, letting that negative stigma be the first thing we associate with this community of people, men, women, old, young, you name it. Doesn't matter what there's just a prevalent negative stigma around them, and it does affect their lives. As a civilian, if you're a civilian watching, if you're a veteran watching, whatever your situation is, if you're active duty, that stigma is affecting people's lives. It is affecting their lives in many, many ways because a narrative is a lens through which we see the world. It's the story that we tell ourselves. And so many people, if you're into mindset or mindfulness and things like that, they're trying to tell themselves all day long, like, I just got to tell myself, like, you are good enough. You are like all of this effort and energy is being put out there to try to like overcome a lot of these issues. But there's this monster of a narrative saying to this community that you are broken, that you have these things going on, that we are scared to deal with you because of these things. And it's not outright like said in that way. It's not as obvious as that, or else we would all fight up and rise against it. But it's happening. So let's all fight up and rise against this because it's happening in very subtle ways. It's being communicated through comparison and through news articles and through marketing slogans and pushes to raise money and all sorts of things. And so one of the things I'm going to talk about today, the thing I'm going to talk about today has to do with suicide. Now, I just want to preface, listen, if this is a triggering conversation for you for any reason, like please just click out of here now. Okay. If you're interested to hear more about what we're going to talk about, then let's dig deeper on this. But one of the things, and again, this is where WTO wants to be. We have to be, not wants to be, we have to be. This mission rose out of a need for a real change. And so we have to be at the forefront saying things, challenging ideas, and saying the things that no one else wants to say. And if that makes us unpopular in certain people's eyes, if people say, hey, that's not right. Well, guess what? If I'm saying true things, then I at least get to sleep at night. Our organization gets to rest well, knowing that we're doing the right thing, standing up for truth, saying what needs to be said, even at the cost of certain people telling us that we're outliers, for instance. I've been told that you guys are outliers, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not being the cool kid on the block, being that we are new and we've carved out a niche locally here in Montana and nationwide. And there are far more people who love us and accept us and embrace everything we're talking about than there are people fighting back against it. And so we're just going to continue to say the things that need to be said. So when it comes to today's conversation, I'm going to talk about some stuff, and it might cause you to form an opinion. You might feel, I don't know, there's that internet warrior thing that kind of kicks in, right? When we like something challenges our viewpoint and we want to speak out and we don't want to listen, we want to shut it off and just speak out what we think. And I really hope that we could just suspend any disbelief for the sake of this. I'm giving you the option to invite me to speak to you. if you're not going to invite me to speak to you about some challenging things to do with veteran suicide and the conversation around that, then you may as well click out. But if you are willing to listen and to move forward in this conversation, then we know we're all trying our best here. And even me, if you have thoughts or ideas or questions as the CEO of Warrior Transition Outdoors, I'm willing to have those conversations. And in fact, that's the goal of this, is to spark of movement of conversation, not just one podcast, but that everyone starts to have the conversation together and ask the important questions to get to a place where that victorious thing really takes hold, where it no longer is acceptable in conversations to say something is retarded, for example, because that it's super offensive and it's not okay anymore. Whereas that used to happen all the time. I grew up in the 90s, and that was just commonplace for people to talk like that. But somewhere along the way, people say, hey, enough is enough. We can't do this. And what victory and the victorious narrative needs to become is just that, where the first mention that I say, hey, I'm a CEO of a veterans nonprofit, or a veteran says, hey, I'm a veteran, right? Like, the first mention of the word veteran cannot come with all of the negative connotations to do with that. Then we would not accept that for any other aspect of life, whether you're a civilian, military, it doesn't matter. We wouldn't accept that. Like, if you're a dad and I was like, oh man, you're a dad, oof, man, dads are just deadbeat. Like, that's not okay to just blanket statement how dads are. Like, that's not a thing. So same thing here. We can't just be blanket statementing. As a veteran that I'm going to have on the podcast here soon, wisely said, there's no such thing as a veteran. There are veterans experiencing life in their own unique ways, but there's no such thing as a veteran. And that's from a storytelling standpoint. You can't just say veterans are this way. This is what a veteran needs. Well, who is a veteran? There are women who are veterans. There are men who are veterans. There are, like I said, it spans all sorts of demographics. So we need to honor that. And then the things that are challenging the community at times, then we can address those things for what they are, rather than giving them all this credit for what they're not. Suicide is that. It is this beast of an issue that is getting far too much airplay and far too much credit for the role it's playing in the lives of the people in this community. There are people that I've had come to me. They've joined WTO because they've been dealing with ideation, or the thoughts have been there. Some people say I would never do it, but they're there. I don't know what to do about it. Some people say I don't know what to do about it. I'm having these thoughts. But once I come at it from a victorious standpoint and I see them and I see in them something incredibly powerful and beautiful, I see their soul and I see what they're capable of. C.S. Lewis says, if we could see each other, if you know C.S. Lewis, books, The Chronicles of Narnia, right? If we could see in each other who we truly are, we would be tempted to worship one another. And that is our defining, like, vision of people. As an organization, as founders, my brother and I, we see people. And so when they come to us with that, we see this big, beautiful soul, and we see what it's experiencing. It's a nuanced approach then. It's not, oh, you're a veteran, you've got this, slap it on you and move on to the next one. No, it is, hey, who are you? You are beautiful. You are powerful. You are all the things. And I see you, man. I see you, woman. And I see what you're going through. And by allowing and helping them to see that within themselves, they're like, oh man, thank you. No, I'm not going to do it. That helped. Like it. And then we get them into family and community. And then we supply other resources, or just friendship, or someone to talk to, or whatever. And that thing that was real, it is. I'm not saying suicide is not a thing. Like, man, it's way more prevalent in the civilian world even than it is the veteran world. Like, the suicide rate for civilians is skyrocketed. That said, to us, it's a very one-on-one conversation, if it's a thing. And by treating it as such, people get to come share with us, and they know I can tell a WTO anything. and I'm not going to be judged, and they're going to help me, and they're going to listen. And so rather than treating it through the stigmatic lens, that's how we approach it. But suicide is taking up way too much space in our conversation about veterans. I went to an amazing conference, honestly, um, this past fall in 2023. And again, it just was one of those things where the people who have gone through it and have dealt with that ideation and those struggles and the plans, and the people who have gone through it, it's real to them. And so those people talk about it. But there are a lot of people just talking about it. And you can tell the difference between John Doe's story and a stigmatic conversation. For instance, when I say I am the CEO of a veteran nonprofit, people respond and say, oh man, that suicide rate. That's stigmatic. That's a conditioning. That's a narrative. That's a lens in which they're viewing this community through. So here's one of the more controversial things I might say. It's not controversial to me because I know the truth, but the whole 22 a day thing. We hear this all the time. Oh man, 22 a day. Can you believe it? Veterans are killing themselves at 22 a day, 22 a day, 22 a day. Hey, would you do 22 push-ups this month every single day? That'll raise awareness and money. Would you do 22 miles? Would you do 2.2 mile walk? Like 22, 22, 22. Hey, it's the 22nd of the month. And here's the thing. That number was never a thing. I'm going to let you sit with that for a second. That number never was a thing. There was a report in 2010 that the VA said it could be 22, and they were including all sorts of things. And then they later recanted their report and said it was never, we included a lot of different information that may have skewed those numbers. And I saw a different report that said it may have been only as high as, which means it never got higher, but it wasn't steady at. It had gotten as high as 18.6, but the number was around 16 and a half. And now listen, one is too many. One is too many on a human level. The way I'm looking at it is through a human level. One is too many. Through a stigmatic lens, we got to stop saying the wrong thing, because it's painting in a picture that isn't even real. And if we're wanting to operate in truth as a human being, whether we're military or not, we should be decidedly choosing to operate in truth every single day, because the truth will set you free, right? Well, I mean, even on that principle alone, if the truth sets you free, operating out of a lie is not creating freedom. It's not creating freedom for ourselves as the ones expanding on and pushing out this lie. It's not creating freedom for the people we claim to care about and serve by talking about the lie. Hey, it's 22 a day. No, it's not. You're over, like, sensationalizing this issue. It is real when it is real. But what we also don't know is, did they come into the military with that connection to that problem before they got into the military? You know, I know plenty of people who have shared as kids they had these thoughts because of the stuff they were going through as kids. And then they get into the military and they're just not ever finding the space and time to maybe heal and overcome those things, but we're blaming the military on all of this. And this goes back to then recruitment. And we have this recruiting crisis right now for the military, and we're wondering why. Because all of these stigmas are affecting how people view the military. Oh man, if you go into the military, you're going to be that much more likely to do this. And I've got news for you, man. I've talked with a lot of people, a lot of veterans say, and I'm not talking, there are some people who did and saw some pretty tough stuff. I can't even fathom. Even my brother, I can't fathom what that man has been through. But there are a lot of people who, even though they saw it and did a lot of hard things, say, my issues came when I got back. And not from what I did or saw, but from being back. They found so much purpose and identity and camaraderie, and everything was so that it's like the closer they were to death, the more they appreciated life. And they came back here, and people aren't appreciating what they have, and they aren't respecting what they have, the freedom they have. And so that's where a lot of the PTS kicks in. And then they start wondering, like, what did I even do? over there. Like people don't even seem to care, and so on and so forth. And so there's any number of reasons why someone might be experiencing suicidal ideation. It could be like just a mental health thing. It could be a physical rewiring of the brain that needs to happen. Like there's so many causes of what this is. And it's even just us from a spiritual standpoint, there's a spiritual reality to it. But we have to operate in truth. It's never been 22 a day. So anytime I meet nonprofits saying that, I try to tell them exactly what I'm telling you. If they're willing to have the conversation. I had a conversation. She wasn't a nonprofit leader, but she is in the business community and doing some pretty cool things. And she mentioned the 22 a day number. And I said, listen, did you know it's never been that much? And I told her this and I showed her this. If you go look it up, it's on Google. It's right there. I'm not making this up. Just go look it up. And I remember the first time I looked it up, like, what is the suicide rate for veterans? And I saw 16.7, up 0.3 since 2001. So the veteran suicide rate is actually not really gone up. Like it's gotten up 0.3 in 20 years, which again, one is too many. I'm just saying. So don't hear me wrong. But over 20 years, it's basically stayed the same. Meanwhile, the civilian suicide rate is skyrocketing. And Congress is putting $51 million, that's the number I could find, $51 million toward the civilian problem and $56 billion to prevent suicide for veterans and military service members. That's insane. Like that is so backwards. Also, the transition itself, right, has from Congress $400 million going toward the transition assistance program, TAP process. And if you consider that 200,000 service members are getting out every single year, that is $2,000 per service member to get out. What is that accomplishing? Nothing. And meanwhile, you got $56 billion. And in my mind, that's a Congress and that's a country saying, I don't actually care about you and your problems. I'm not going to do anything upstream to really help you until it's that last minute. And don't you dare please do that. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Because that's going to make me, Uncle Sam, that's going to make me look real bad if you do that. And if if that number, it's going to make us look real bad. Well, my brother saw that statistic basically staying the same for 20 years, $56 billion, and asked a guy who was not in a position, he was not the right guy to ask, but he asked the genuine question of like, hey, is this even working then? Like, what evidence do you have that $56 billion is doing anything? This is such a personal issue. Your institutional money, throwing money at it to pat yourself on the back and say, hey, we threw money at it. Look what we did. We put 56 billion, but what did you do? Again, this is why we started WTO, because the way we saw veterans being treated in other nonprofit spaces, one of which I was the executive director for 3 weeks and I had to quit because it was so disgusting. Like stuff is really coming down on people and it's really hurting them and keeping them from thriving. And it became a mission. Like we can't wait till this is convenient. We have to start WTO now. We were going to wait till 2025 when he retired. But we started it now. And it's the same reason we're saying this stuff now, because all of this has to change. You flip that number, 400 million. If you want to keep putting money towards suicide prevention, 400 million toward that, and 56 billion toward transition resources and support, and a lot of like what we're doing, like $56 billion to scale up what we're doing. And we would save the world. You give us half that, cut that number in half and put it toward other things. We would save the world. You give us $2 million right now. My brother and I, we're going to go save the world through WTO because we have learned how to do a lot with a little, and it's not always about money. It's about human to human connection, human to human relationships. That is where the secret sauce is. That is what genuinely connects people to a path for healing. But again, if I were the kind of person just 22, beating that drum all day long, if I was that kind of person, you come to me and I say, hey, I'm here to help you 22, 22, 22. How can I help 22, 22, 22? And it's like people say like that's my mission is to eliminate the 22 a day. Well, mission accomplished. It never was 22 a day. But that affects how I treat people. But again, this is how this culture and society kind of works is that we see the fact that 22, 22, well, I'm interacting with you 22, but my mindset, my narrative is the 22 thing. But from the outside, we see, oh, they're interacting. That's the human connections Gabe's talking about. It's not. That connection is shallow and transactional, and it's putting one person over another and keeping them, and it's painting them in this light of they've got this issue that I'm here to try to fix. But in the mere fact of repeating, this is my mission, this is my mission, you're actually not, it's a hamster on a wheel. That's not the human interaction I'm talking about. That's not the secret sauce I'm talking about. I'm talking about genuinely caring. I'm not talking about doing things for people either. I'm talking about caring. And sometimes if you have had a good friend ever in your life, you know, whether that was a brother or sister or mom or uncle or dad or whatever, you know that you going through your trial was helped by them being there for you, even if they did not have an answer for you, even if they did not do anything for you. Just them being there was what helped you get through, knowing that you weren't alone. And so this is what I'm talking about. There's a difference between people who keep preaching 22 a day and the people who understand. And I'm not the only one. The people who understand that this is not real and that we need to treat people like people. And oh, as a human, you have a veteran status. Great. Let's talk about that. Oh, and as a veteran, you are not experiencing ideation. Great. I didn't paint that on you anyway. So cool. Or, hey, you are. Cool. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate your openness and honesty. Let's dig into who you are and what you're going through. And when we can create that tailored approach to every single person, whether you're in a nonprofit space or just a human being trying to do the right thing for others, that's going to free them up to be themselves and to share with you and to know that they're not alone. But this 22-day thing, man, I've had several, I'm a civilian, but I have had dozens of veterans tell me those push-ups don't help me. That 22-day campaign is not helping me. And these are people who have either attempted suicide in their lifetime or have suicidal ideation. What they've always come back to me and said is, I needed someone who genuinely cared in those moments, or I had someone that cared, and that's what helped me get through it. You know, my brother and I sat through, when we started WTO, we sat through a suicide prevention awareness training. And I took various principles from that. As you know, I kind of take what I think is important and I left what I felt like was kind of baloney. But I remember sitting in there, and this is part of the baloney, was that as good-hearted as the people trying to put this on were, everyone in that room was scared to have to go back to their various employment situation to work with veterans. They're scared to have to go back and deal with veterans. You could tell by their questions they asked, by what they said, by literally they were nervous. Oh my gosh, what do you do if they do come to you and say this? And the fear in their voice. And hey, thank you. Thank you for asking that question, because let's get to the bottom of it. But this topic has created so much fear that people are nervous and they feel like it's going to be this traumatic situation they're going to be put in when a veteran comes to them and says, hey, I'm dealing with some ideation. But when you just see people as people and a veteran does that, hey man, I'm here with you. Doesn't surprise me. You're a human. Who hasn't had some form of ideation at one point in their lives? I have been cooking and I'll just hear a random like, yeah, you should go die. It's like, what? Like, where does that come from? I have my own personal beliefs as to where that comes from. And I'll dig in on a spiritual level to navigate to see what's happening there. And then I find my freedom. But not everyone has that. But still, I have a lot of empathy because I too have experienced this. My brother, when he was a kid, he experienced suicidal thoughts. He had a plan. He tried as a kid. So again, as another veteran told me, like, who are you if you what are you, a sociopath, if you don't look around you in this world and see that people are struggling, that this life can be very tough, that there's a lot of suffering and pain and trials, and that, who to disconnect yourself from that ideation as if you've never experienced it yourself. You're lacking some empathy there, big time. But that's all to say, 22 a day, never been a thing. Raise it, the flag, mission accomplished, George Bush style. Like, this is mission accomplished for those who are out there and have claimed that ending 22 a day is their mission every single day. It's done. Congratulations. Let's move on and let's treat people like people. I'm not saying the suicidal ideation has gone away for some people that happen to be veterans, that happen to have this going on in their life. I'm saying that the stigma can stop. Again, just please don't hear me wrong, okay? Because we need to show people their strength again and stop reminding them of this weakness that might not even be theirs to begin with. And I've actually had people tell me, like, I started feeling those things because it was all that was talked about. It's almost like they feel that, oh, because this is how veterans are spoken about, I'm not feeling that, but maybe I should be. And then they fall into something that was never even theirs to begin with. We have got to choose victory for these people in our minds, as our lens, as our narrative that we see the world through. Because they are, man, they are so victorious by signing that line, by doing what they did to allow me to live my life. The best we could do for them is to treat them with love and genuine love, genuine respect, and not keep perpetuating a bunch of lies about who they are. That's my message. Please, like I said, I hope you receive that the right way. I anticipate that the more people who see it, just percentage wise, maybe a few people didn't anticipate it the right way, but you know my heart. If you know my heart, you know what I'm saying here. And you could go look up for yourself. Allow your own paradigm to be shifted. That's how it started for me. I was on that 22 a day thing myself until I realized that it was never a thing. And I just decided, hey, because it's not a thing, I'm not going to say it. And I'm going to tell people who do say it that it's not a thing, so we can all move toward the thing, the real thing, and move toward truth and freedom together. I love you. Have a great weekend. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.